Hey everyone, it's really great to be with you on week 4 of our series through Romans 9, 10, and 11. And this week is a little bit different. You won't find this resource in your booklet that you received. Us as an eldership team and as preachers got together and decided we need to spend a bit more time in Romans 11. There's a lot to unpack in these verses, especially in regards to Israel and its place and us as Gentiles and what Paul is talking about. And so this is a kind of added in week, and from next week it's in your booklets again. So we're sorry about that, but we really felt like we had to really drill down on this chapter and see what Paul is trying to say. And so this week we look at the fact that Paul is warning that God's kindness towards us shouldn't lead to arrogance, but to a deep humility. Paul has just kind of unpacked how we as Gentiles, those who are non-Jewish people, have been added into God's great plan of salvation, and this should lead to a deep humility. And humility is quite an interesting topic to look at. It's not something that the world considers a great thing to pursue these days, but Paul's really saying, he's saying, don't be arrogant. When I first became a Christian, I remember I had quite a bit of arrogance that I knew all the answers to everyone's questions. And there's nothing wrong in pursuing answers for the world's questions, but a lot of the time I came across as very arrogant and from a place of pride. I was one of those people that you did not want in your connect group. I would hog the conversation, want to give all the answers. And I remember after one particular evening where I felt like I'd done a great job at answering someone's question who came at me quite a bit, and feeling like I'd won the debate, a very much older, more mature, more wise Christian came alongside me and said, hey, you know what? No one listened to what you said because it came from a place of pride and arrogance. It's basically saying your answer may have been right, but because your tone was arrogant and prideful and full of pride, no one listened to it. It wasn't sweet to people's ears. And I've never forgotten that, and it was a great lesson for me, because as one of the things that we should pursue as Christians is a deep humility. And Paul is saying here that one of the things that stops us from becoming arrogant is to realize that we didn't deserve salvation, and now we have been grafted into God's great plan of salvation along with the believing Israelites. And that should lead to a deep sense of humility. And last week we looked at gratefulness. But if we look across our world, it seems like pride is seen more as a virtue than something that we are to avoid. It seems like it's okay to be arrogant. Those who seem to be arrogant seem to get all the airtime. And yet here Paul is saying quite clearly, do not be arrogant. James 4 verse 6 says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. It's a beautiful verse, but also a very stark warning to us to not pursue pride, but actually to avoid it, because God opposes the proud. It's like he puts his hand down, it puts his hand over and makes sure that it doesn't come near him. I don't know if you've ever been in a pool where you've had a large inflatable ball and you've tried to push that ball underneath the water. It's like God is pushing pride away from him. And every time it tries to pop up, God continues to push it down. He opposes the proud. And so there are 3 things from this verse that I think is really good to take note of. Proverbs 21 verse 4 says, pride is considered a sin. It says pride leads to destruction. In the Bible, you will see that sometimes Paul says, I boast, but he's boasting in someone else. He's not boasting in himself. In actual fact, he says that his boast is in Jesus Christ. And so pride is seen often as those who are against God and is considered a sin. The second thing we see is pride comes from a false sense of wisdom. If we think we're wise within ourselves, the Bible warns us in Romans 1, be careful. It can lead to a false sense of wisdom. Galatians 3 verse 6 says, pride brings deception. Jesus talking about pride in a parable, says that two people came to the temple and kind of offered themselves up to God. And the one did it in a proud and arrogant way, thinking that God was listening to him because he had done all the right things. Whereas the other man came, he was a tax collector, and repented and said, God, I'm a sinner. And Jesus said, basically, God took favor on the tax collector. There was something that the tax collector understood, that the fact that God was even listening to him put him in his right place. He understood where he was, whereas the religious man did not. And I think so often we can think to ourselves that pride is something that we should grab a hold of, and because the world sees it a virtue, we should pursue it. But in actual fact, Romans 11 and Galatians 3 verse 6 and the parable actually shows that God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. And so I'm sure this is going to spark a lot of discussion in your group. And I'm really hoping that you have a fruitful and interesting discussion around this, and that we walk out incredibly amazed at God's goodness and kindness at allowing us to be part of his great plan of salvation, and so that we really have there's no place for any arrogance in our lives. So I hope you have a great evening. I trust this has been helpful, and we'll see you next week.